Yeah, nice.
Give her the
Okay,
stage.
can we start? Cool. Can everyone hear me? Yeah, awesome, great. Thank you very much that you're joining this panel. I think it's an important topic, so I'm really happy to see you all here. Today we want to talk about the impact of gaming on climate change and how you as developers or like part of the industry can make a change. Before we start, because we are such a like small group, are you like how many of you are developers? Okay, we have 3 developers, some management people in the 1, 2, nice. Okay, so for the panel today, we have Daniel Jacobs here. He is the project manager for sustainability from Xbox. We have Benjamin Schönfeld. Yeah, this is Dan. Benjamin Schönfeld, the CEO of NovoServe. They help the industry to provide, they provide the industry with servers. We have Jiri Kupiainen here, CEO of Matchmade. They connect creators with big brands. Jiri has also been very passionate about sustainable business travel and climate change and games in general. In the beginning of the year, we made a trip together to interview the CEOs of the games industry to figure out what their view is on climate change and what they plan to do about it. And a quick introduction of myself. I'm the host of the panel. I'm Maria. I'm the co-founder of the Games Forest Club. We help the games industry to preserve forests. But yeah, back to the trip, I would like to show you a small video, like an inspirational one, where you can see some snippets of the trip. We traveled around Europe by bus and train. We covered 40,000 kilometers, visited 25 cities, and talked to 38 leaders within Europe. And here I hopefully can share a video with you. Maybe. Maybe not. Oh shit, I'm sorry. Sorry.
Are we getting audio?
Can you hear it?
No, it's muted.
Okay. So anyway, basically, if you want to see what the leaders have to say, you can see the whole interview series also on YouTube. The idea was really to see what is the view on the different on that topic, and what we discovered on that trip is that it's really important to know where your emissions are coming from. Sorry. Fuck. And like if you want to make a change, to really know your numbers, because a lot of studios said that they're recycling, right, that they try to turn down their travel, but in the end, scope 3 is the biggest impact the industry has on climate, and scope 3 includes the emissions which are caused when players play your game. So the electricity which they use while playing your game with their devices, and also like a big chunk of it is also the servers emissions, which are in, and this is also what we will discuss in the panel. Right now, Benjamin will tell you a little bit more about the impact of servers and how you can make a change there, if I manage to get his presentation up.
Hi everyone, Benjamin. Nice to see you all here. In preparation for this panel, basically we try to see, okay, everybody typically that delivers a game online uses servers, obviously. either cloud servers from the hyperscalers or dedicated infrastructure or on-premise, and all of that obviously has different carbon footprints and different impact on the environment. In our understanding, basically, we said, okay, it cannot be that hard to find data points and then like look at it. And we said, okay, there's a 3 billion player base on the planet. There's a certain split over the planet and the regions. And then by that, we had a study that said there's like 24 million tons of carbon emissions in the US. By that, we extrapolated some data and spread it over the planet. But there's no reliable data really. So for me, the biggest learning curve basically throughout the whole thing was that, you know, there's a German saying that says, trau niemals einer Statistik, die du nicht selber gefälscht hast, which is like translating into never trust the statistics that you didn't fix yourself or fake yourself. But basically, it's really, if we go to the next slide, so in my direct business, I can take any machine, I can draw the power emission of it and I say, okay, this is your carbon footprint. As a server provider, you would take the whole cost of sales. So like, okay, there's certain marketing activities, there's a certain amount of sales, there's certain this, that. So you can factor it into and break it down into a carbon footprint per machine and per the usage of the machine. But what you find online is really like outdated. It's really like a scattered landscape of maybe here a bit of data and there a bit of data, and nobody's really like presenting anything. Nobody wants to be the bad guy, says like, oh, we're using that much power. So what you see, what you can get in the internet is basically a comparison that says, okay, obviously green energy is less bad than if you don't use green energy. If your provider is using green energy, then typically the carbon footprint is 2 to 3 times less than when you're using like the opposite. Now the same counts for hyperscalers versus on-prem or data center. From my side, as the in this case evil data center provider, or not data center provider, but dedicated server provider in a data center, basically says, okay, the green cloud server is half as bad by carbon footprint as what we provide to our servers as raw compute. But I would argue, and then we later have maybe someone joining the panel that can put some more on that, is what about the hypervisor? What about the software? What about all the activities they do around a cloud setup, basically, that also factors into the carbon footprint of a machine? So for us, it's really like there's not a lot of data. And if we go on again, then is you basically can also look into it and say, okay, it's not only the hardware, but it's also the traffic. Because if we deliver a game to the players, then it means there is bandwidth included. So all the machinery that is used to transport that data is basically consuming power. That has an impact on the front-to-end delivery of something. And I'm not going to go into the data itself. It's just really, it's one set that you can find in the internet. There's a few websites who will list something, but I don't really want to say like this is it. I want to basically say like if you are interested in it, you should get an understanding of, and then starting to look around. But like said, and I hope with Maria we can talk about that more also, is we need trustworthy points where we can get those data from. And then if we move on to basically the third part, is anyone developing a game by basically already choosing which programming languages you use to deliver a game. It has an impact basically on how the carbon footprint of your game will also be turning out. Because this is I think a 2018, 2019 study. There's some updates on it because the programming languages of course get updates and makes them a bit more efficient here, a bit more efficient there. But basically it's really, if you go for a C plus or a Python, there's a huge difference in how the carbon footprint of a software or programming language really factors in. And that's basically already bringing us to the last one, where it's like, hey, what is typical like things like day-to-day activities that anyone can do to really like already make an impact and have you know, a more friendly carbon footprint throughout your own. It's like unsubscribe from emailing list. Don't CC the whole planet of you know, everyone in your company, because again, it might not seem like a big thing, but every email that someone receives has a carbon footprint. Idle down servers that are not in use, or at least like shift workloads that maybe from, you know, the follow the sun principle. It's like your player base on the planet is going to sleep on one side and is going waking up on another, then shift that activity around.
Cool. Yeah.
Lots of it. Sorry.
Yeah, no, all good. Thank you very much. As a next step, we will hear about game development and how there you can make a difference before we switch to the panel. So let me get Daniel's slides up here.
Okay.
Awesome. It works. Here we go.
Thank you. Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
I cannot.
You can hear me? Yeah. Okay, cool. Thank you. I'm Daniel. I work in the UK as a game sustainability project manager for Xbox and a bit of PC.
Do you want maybe to come here? Then you can like directly.
Sure.
Yeah.
Good idea. Thank you. Thanks very much. I presume I just pressed right. Okay. So yeah. So if I skip these first two slides because we can talk about these later, and I want to jump to the more interesting parts, I suppose, for all of you lot. So the reason why gaming sustainability in Xbox really got going is because we were, you know, there's several reasons, but we were reading from the gaming press and news journalists in general about how they were waking up and identifying video games as in their words, an environmental nightmare. Because, you know, there's a lot of concern about the recyclability of the products, from your devices to your controllers to the peripherals, through to the amount of energy that these consoles and PCs and mobiles ultimately consume when gaming. You know, if you look on Xbox specifically, consoles can use, you know, around 200 watts an hour, which is a lot of electricity. PC gaming, obviously, even more still. So we wanted to find and identify energy efficiency interventions that we could pass along through games that would save on energy, which would also save gamers on their energy bills, and ultimately lower the carbon footprint of the industry. How do we go about doing this to bring people along with us on the journey? Well, typically we found four persuasive arguments when talking to people. The first is the technical challenge. For those of you here who are engineers, and some of you raise your hands, engineers love a challenge. They love finding the challenge and how to solve it, right? So what better way to do that than identify ways to introduce energy efficiency interventions into game code without impacting gameplay fidelity? Because that's the most important part about all of this, is everything I discuss is not to lower gameplay performance, gameplay visuals, gameplay audio. We want to keep games looking and sounding as beautiful as they were, but using slightly less energy. The regulatory piece is next. You know, at the moment, regulations for the EU and the CEC, which is the California Energy Commission, has the video game industry as voluntary participants rather than anything being compulsory. But we want to keep ahead of that by making sure they see we are delivering energy efficiency improvements into gaming. Third is if you've just got a passion for sustainability, fantastic. And last but not least, if you want to feel old, anybody from 2010 onwards is Generation Alpha, so 13-year-olds and up. Doesn't that make you feel really old? More and more want to give their money to organisations that have climate action as part of their organisational commitments. So these are some things that we've introduced on Xbox so far. We can talk about this a little bit later, but very quickly, we've delivered an energy saving mode, a drop from an average of 15 watts to half a watt per hour, and your console still remains up to date. In the middle here, carbon aware. Xbox consoles will now identify when renewable energy is at its highest in your local energy grid, and then deliver and download updates and installed updates at that period of time during the nightly maintenance windows. So let's get on to the developer tools, because I think this is the most interesting for this audience, seeing as some of you are developers. If I skip forward to here. Right, so to help game developers find ways to lower the power consumption, we first of all needed to provide developer tools to allow you to see the power that your games are consuming in real time. And to support that, we've given a whole bunch of tools in what's called the Xbox Sustainability Developer Kit, or Xbox Sustainability Toolkit, sorry, as part of the GDK, the Game Developer Kit. One of those is we now give you a tool on the front of your dev kit which shows you the power consumption in real time that your title is using at that moment. So if you were to see your title was using 80% of the power budget of the console in just the main menu, but 70% in gameplay, that might identify, hey, this is an opportunity for us to find something to improve here. And you can see that this is circled. This is what it looks like on the front of your dev kit. You can also see this as a real-time graph of power over time to see the power consumption of your title as you're playing it or as your QA you're testing it. PIX, which is Performance Investigator for Xbox, is the go-to perf tool that we provide as part of the game developer kit. And this also gives you a readout of the average or the estimated power consumption of your title in real time. And then this is a way to view into the milliseconds of what your title is doing here. So you can kind of see here along the vertical axis that it's the power consumption of the console, and on the horizontal axis is obviously time. And we also provide you with an API to allow you to to build your own tools to use the PIX Power Metrics API. And I'll try and cover 2 more slides before I hand over. I think I'm good for time. So we've been doing lots of work with game development teams. 343 Industries, who obviously do Halo, is the example that I've got on the screen here, but we've done some fantastic collaboration with Fortnite, with Ubisoft, more recently with the Call of Duty team, to find energy efficiency improvements that are imperceptible to gamers. They don't even know something's happening, but we're using less power on the console, therefore using less energy, therefore lowering the carbon footprint. So really quickly from left to right, on the far left is the original native resolution and frame rate of Halo Infinite in the menus. It was, as you can see, close to 4K, 60 FPS. The average power, 67.5%. Then with a drop of 60 FPS to 30 FPS, you can see that the power savings in green now is 37.5% power savings as a result of the frame rate drop, but keeping the resolution the same. The next one along shows the resolution, the internal resolution dropping, but the frame rate remaining high. Again, you can see the power savings here about 33%. And last but not least, it was dropping both the frame rate and resolution. Now remember, if you drop the internal resolution, the console upscaler still upscales to 4K, but to the gamer, very, very difficult to notice any difference. So in the end, they settled 343 on this option here. They dropped it to 1080p internal resolution, let the console upscale up, bring it up to 4K, but they wanted to keep the menu snappy, which is why they kept it at 60 FPS. But that simple change with a couple of days, one engineer's work, delivered 33% power savings, which is fantastic. By introducing this across the menus of the game, because we know from telemetry that users spend approximately a quarter of their time in the menus, they were able to deliver a 12% global power saving across their product on all of Xbox consoles. And I can talk more about the Fortnite example later, which was even better still. And very, very last but not least, if I just skip forward to this, if you publish on Xbox, you'll have access to a series of power telemetry, energy telemetry, and carbon footprint savings. So we can actually show you the carbon footprint of your title on Xbox consoles, as well as your average power. So you can kind of measure over time. In this particular instance, this title, you can see they delivered energy efficiency improvements about here, and this was the average power consumption of their title, dropped between January, February, and March. So all of this telemetry and loads more is available as part of the Xbox Sustainability Toolkit. So allow me to hand over to Jiri next.
Could you show the slide which shows the scope-free emissions, just like
Sure.
maybe, because I think it's really important to see that scope-free really makes it makes a difference compared to the other scopes.
And just for context as well, because sometimes I take for granted, right, what we're talking about here. So you build games, you release games. Games go onto PC, onto console, onto mobile, whatever that platform is. Now let's just take console as the example. Now consoles draw a lot of power from the wall socket into electricity. That comes from your local energy grid. That energy grid delivers its power via a combination of fossil fuels and renewable energy. Now we're able to count up the amount of fossil fuels by tracking the amount of power your game uses on console. Power multiplied by time equals energy. Energy is delivered by that fossil fuel and renewable energy, and we can purchase what's called emissions factors by any energy grid in the world, which you multiply by energy, and that's delivered in terms of kilograms of CO2e per kilowatt hour. So that's how we're able to track our carbon footprint related to the use of our sold products, in this case Xbox. Now Microsoft's overall carbon footprint for FY22, financial year 22, was a fraction over 12.5 million metric tons in terms of scope 3, about 13 million metric tons of CO2e, which if I'm not mistaken is the equivalent of about 13 billion car miles driven. It's the equivalent emissions of 32 billion car miles, which is what, 13 million metric tons. Now, of this little sliver here, if I move over, this represents all of scope 3. So scope 3 is just under 97% of Microsoft's overall emissions. So scope 1, generally speaking, is the fuel combustion of your organization. Scope 2 is the energy used by your owned infrastructure. So you walk into an office, you turn the light switch on, you turn the microwave on, you plug in a PC, that's scope 2, and everything else is scope 3. So use of sold products, in our case, is actually about 30%, but Microsoft has made significant investment in carbon removal to offset a portion of our emissions. So that's dropped from 30% to 10%. But for everyone here, probably your scope 3 category 11 is probably the largest part of your carbon footprint. So yeah.
Okay, yeah, thanks.
Cool.
And I mean, of course, streaming your games also causes emissions, and more on that.
Yeah,
you see it
here, maybe.
Yeah. It's Darstellung.
No, that's not the right.
Okay.
Where are we?
Darstellung.
Yeah.
Yeah, in Vollbildmodus. Yeah.
Okay, cool. So I guess to kind of complete the whole circle of video game culture, at least as far as it lives on devices, I want to talk a little bit about video streaming. My background is that I actually used to make games and I used to make game engines, so I hopefully have something to contribute to this kind of discussion as well. But for the past 7 years I've been running Matchmade, where we work with about 20,000 YouTubers who mostly play video games on YouTube. So I wanted to look at like how do those emissions actually stack up, and I think this will be interesting because this whole thought of lies, damn lies and statistics will definitely kick in, because my numbers are massively different than yours are. So let's see how we feel about that. Already covered, I mean, all the same stuff needs to happen for video as well. You have all the servers, you have all the data transmission, you have all the like on-device use. So the same things that go into playing a video game also go into watching a stream of somebody else playing a video game. And my number is 56 grams of CO2 per 1 hour, as opposed to 10 kilos for the bandwidth, which maybe is a good way of illustrating the point that we desperately need significantly better data for all of this stuff. Like this is we're talking orders of magnitude differences in kind of official estimates of emissions, and they're like, these are just numbers that somebody pulled up from somewhere, and like we don't have any kind of accountability for people saying that they're net zero, for example. So this is coming from the Carbon Trust and the International Energy Agency, IEA. They also did a study coming up with similar numbers. But again, it just kind of illustrates the point in the end that the majority of your emissions come really from the actual end user using their devices and getting the content to them in the form of servers and data transmission infrastructure and whatnot. So this is gonna be the problem for all of us always. And of course that means that in the end, how the electricity that powers the end user's device, how the electricity that powers the data center and the internet infrastructure and whatnot, where that electricity comes from is one of the biggest kind of factors in terms of like whether we are a really green industry or not. And again, like we need to understand kind of that there are, even within countries that you might consider to be fairly similar. So for example, Sweden and Germany, they're both modern European nations. But actually, German electricity is dirty as hell. You people really like your brown coal, whereas Swedish electricity is almost completely renewable. And this turns out makes a pretty dramatic difference in terms of whether playing a game or watching a game being played is green or not. Same thing for devices. If you have your Xbox plugged into your gigantic TV, it turns out your emissions are going to be significantly, dramatically higher than if you're just watching something on your iPhone. I mean, this is all stuff we know, but again, when we talk about actually calculating our emissions and really getting an accurate picture of how bad your footprint is as a game developer or as somebody whose game is being streamed, the sins of certain kinds of games are significantly higher than the sins of, for example, mobile games. And then I guess to present some kind of a counterpoint, in the end, of course, the majority of our industry's emissions are coming from electricity production. And of course, that's kind of one of the nice things happening in the world now is that renewables are taking over, and solar and wind are about to take over fossil fuels, like or individual fossil fuels in terms of like the share of electricity produced. Same thing happening with data centers and whatnot. The efficiency of data centers and data transmission is improving dramatically all the time. So even though the volume of data is going up and up and up, the actual emissions from this stuff are staying flat. Which I guess like maybe would be an interesting discussion for the panel. Like, so for example, on the YouTube show, which unfortunately we couldn't show the clip, but we interviewed Hilmar from who's running CCP, who make EVE Online. And he made the argument that the games industry is doing already everything we have to do in terms of the green transition, because what we do is that we take people from, you know, satisfying their emotional needs in the real world. We take it to the virtual world, which is all now being, you know, turned into green electricity. So actually, we are already sin-free. This is not necessarily my position, but maybe something that we can discuss. And finally, to kind of put this streaming and whatnot into kind of context, like what does 56 grams of CO2 equivalent mean? It's you do one NFT transaction, that's about 1,000 hours of streaming. You pay for your coffee, that's about 4 minutes of streaming. You drive your car for a kilometer, that's about 4 hours of streaming. And then you buy your coffee, you buy your latte, and you could, instead of buying that coffee, you can just watch YouTube for 10 hours and end up with the same level of climate guilt. So I think if my numbers are reliable, I would say that watching YouTube videos or Twitch streams is not one of the biggest carbon crimes, nature crimes you can do.
Cool.
That's it.
Thanks. Thank you so much. I think now it would be great to start off with the panel. So I would ask you to join. Yeah. So maybe before we start, are there questions right away, or? Yeah?
Go.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Test. Can you hear me better now? Better? No?
Only you guys can hear. We have no
headsets.
Regulatory requirements. What do you see?
What developments do you see in terms of the regulatory requirements becoming binding? Because when we look at other industries, ESG and so on, the capital markets analysts are more keen in understanding what the company is doing.
Right.
How do you see this trend translating into gaming industry and preparing in terms of this becoming a rather binding law as opposed to a voluntarily basis?
Okay, yeah, I think I got the question. Hopefully everyone else caught the question as well. If you didn't, just raise your hand and I can try and repeat it. But ultimately the question is about regulatory. Yeah, so at the moment regulations are very much voluntary for the games industry. There was strong encouragement, shall we say, from the EU and the CEC, the California Energy Commission, who are the two most stringent, I think, of the regulatory bodies out there. One was they expected any device in standby mode, by that still able to communicate with the internet, to be less than 1 watt. Xbox wasn't less than 1 watt at that point, still being able to communicate with Xbox Live. So that's why we introduced Energy Saver mode. If you look in some states across America, I know that Alienware were unable to sell some of their products because it was using too much power, their PC. So that's one example actually of regulations becoming mandatory and compulsory. But generally speaking, as long as they see the device manufacturers doing the best they can to lower energy, we're always going to remain, well, hopefully going to remain voluntary rather than compulsory for those regulations. I suppose what I see next, I don't see it going to software makers anytime soon. I think it's going to be very much on the device manufacturers, but you know, the hardware runs software, so we all need to collaborate with our software partners all the way. But so far I think we're mostly ahead of any regulations, and I don't think as a software maker, presumably, I don't foresee it's going to hit software makers in the foreseeable future.
Actually, like, it's interesting because I would disagree.
Oh, okay, go for it,
Yeah, because like, especially if we talk about regulations within Europe, there will be a change. There is a European Corporate Sustainability Directive. It will affect all kinds of companies by 2027. So right now it's just affecting the bigger companies with a revenue over 20 million, but it will affect everyone, every company which is bigger than 20 employees within Europe. So there is definitely a need to know your emissions and to know how to report. And this will be like a requirement. It's the same report you do every year for your finances, like the accounting report. The same you will have to do for sustainability. That's why it's so important that we now talk about like an industry-wide standard, or like find ways to how calculate or how to deal with it. Because as we could see during the presentations, the numbers are it's
exactly hard to, like I said, find comparable data. Now, even if you find something that should mention about the same comparable set of data, but if you're talking apples to apples or something completely different, and that's really where I don't feel bad at all that our data don't match. We have something to talk about, because like streaming. What is streaming? Is it game streaming? Is it Netflix? Is it you know, just really 1 GB of data going from A to B? How do you measure it? So what is the path you're taking? But I would also agree that there is initiatives in Brussels that we as a like hosting company eye very closely, because it will have an impact.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry, you're talking about the organization as opposed to the performance of the software running on the devices, right? Yeah. You are correct. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah.
That's how I understood the question, but you're right. Yeah.
Sorry. But maybe like, what's about or like, what's your view on this regulatory? Like, how do you feel? Like, do you feel prepared, or what would need to happen? And maybe or maybe you get it.
Go for it.
Yeah.
Well, it depends a lot on your take, or your company's take on how you want to face it. We obviously, otherwise I wouldn't be sitting here, want to face it head on. Our whole vision around the company is we as a high energy consumption business basically have an interest in lowering energy consumption, because it saves us, apology for the language here, lots of cost. And we want to like incentivize our users basically to do the same. But it is also something that you have to have an eye to regulations coming. And the more you are ahead of the curve and not just looking at it like, okay, it's something that we compulsory have to abide to, it will bring you in a better position once it hits, because we see a lot of people just ignoring it, and I think they're going to have a hard time when it actually kicks live.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's great that Xbox is offering this service, so you can, check your emissions. But it is important that we have this kind of service for all kinds of devices, so all the different developers can have an insight there. So
on that conversation, for the organizational side, one product that Microsoft does now offer is Microsoft Sustainability Manager. I don't know if anyone's checked it out, but it's a cloud-based service that allows any organization to input their activity data, and by activity data it could be like, I don't know, a person traveled to Berlin and back on a train, for example, or activity data could be I use X megawatt hours in my software running on devices, whatever it might be. and then MSM, Microsoft Sustainability Manager, then converts that to emissions, and then you can track all of these insights and data and intelligence in reports in MSM, unique to your company and your organization, be able to track your trend over time. And then you can also input, carbon removal, carbon offsets that you've purchased as well against your total in MSM. It's a very handy tool to be able to use.
Yeah. But maybe the thing is, it's not free to use, and I think what we would need is maybe to have access to data where we have comparable data within the industry, because as we could see right now, we also don't know what kind of tools are using what kind of calculation tools. There's no comparability on that spot, but how do you see the things going forward in future?
I think we're actually out of time.
Oh no.
Oh, okay, okay.
I would support the idea that we need comparable industry-wide data so that we can do this properly.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then we still need to talk about offsetting and how to do that properly, because that's also one thing that we haven't figured out in the least in this industry. So there's some work to be done.
Okay, thank you for your time.
Thanks everyone.
We'll be around.